Today on the show, we're going to talk about Kitty Pryde, also known as Shadowcat from the X-Men. If you didn't know that she's only around today thanks to Magneto, then this show is for you. So, Kitty Pryde, a mutant with the ability to phase through objects. She was actually only created because the editors of the X-Men actually had a really big issue with the comic. You see, the X-Men was supposed to be about a school of mutants, but that school aspect had never really been explored. Kitty Pryde would prove to be an instant hit, so much so that she would be the star of the Days of Future Past storyline, and she would also star in her own 6-issue miniseries called Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. So, Kitty Pryde, a relatively normal girl from Illinois, but at the age of 13, her mutant powers would begin to manifest. Originally, Charles Xavier and Emma Frost wanted Kitty to join their respective teams, meaning Charles wanted Kitty to join the X-Men and Emma Frost wanted Kitty to join the Hellfire Club. Now, initially, Kitty would meet with the X-Men while in a meeting with her parents, but during the meeting, Storm would pull Kitty aside and tell her the truth about the school and the X-Men and Charles Xavier, and this whole thing excited Kitty to no end. Storm and Kitty would be interrupted by a group of mercenaries that were under the command of Emma Frost, but then Wolverine would come in and make very quick work of these mercenaries, but then Wolverine and Storm would be telepathically attacked by Emma Frost, which resulted in their defeat and capture while Kitty ran away. Kitty was able to get in touch with Phoenix, Cyclops and Nightcrawler, and with some help from the newly introduced Dazzler, the day would be saved. Kitty would join the X-Men in the Uncanny X-Men issue 138 and would use the codename Sprite. Now, all members of the X-Men are taught how to protect themselves from psychic attacks very early on, but before Kitty could be taught how, she is possessed by her adult self from an alternate future timeline. This is obviously the Days of Future Past storyline, which I already did a video on, so if you want more information on that, please click the link down below. Kitty's parents would eventually move Kitty to the White Queen's Massachusetts Academy, but Kitty would be slightly crap there, so Emma Frost would revoke Kitty's admission. As Kitty grew, so did her relationships with other X-Men, although initially she was really put off by mutants that had physical abnormalities, particularly Nightcrawler. However, over time she would get over this phobia of physical differences and she would become really close to Nightcrawler. She would be really close with Colossus and be really close with his sister, Illyana. Wolverine would act as her mentor, and to Storm, Kitty was the daughter that Storm never got to have. When the X-Men went into space for a while, Kitty would be moved to a team called the New Mutants, which were basically a team of young and up-and-coming mutants. Kitty would convince Professor Xavier to let her remain a full member of the X-Men because she was already trained to work in that team and because she was highly intelligent and very mature. It is worth saying that the New Mutants weren't crap or anything. In fact, Kitty would be kidnapped by the White Queen and the New Mutants would rescue her. Eventually, there will be a 6-issue miniseries called Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, and basically this series served to revamp Kitty's character and help her fit into the direction that the X-Men was going into. Now, Kitty had a bright and peppy personality, she was really fun to be around, she was the light in every room, and then she'll be possessed by a demon called Ogun. Ogun basically gives Kitty a whole lifetime's worth of martial arts training, but he would brainwash her into becoming an assassin and send her off to kill Wolverine. Fortunately, with some help, she is able to break out of Ogun's control, and she and Wolverine are closer than ever. Then when Kitty returns to the X-Men, she's definitely not the same character anymore. Her personality is considerably darker, so she changes her codename from Sprite to Shadowcat. In the Mutant Massacre arc, Kitty would be hurt by Harpoon's spear, and this results in her losing control of her powers and she can't regain solidity. Kitty is rushed to Moira McTaggart, who is able to make sure that Kitty's state doesn't become so bad that she ceases to exist, but she isn't able to do much more than that. A whole mess of things would happen, but basically the X-Men would go to the Fantastic Four for help, and the Fantastic Four are all like, oh, we don't know if we can do anything, so we're not gonna try. So the X-Men would go to Doctor Doom, and then the Fantastic Four are all like, oh, they went to Doctor Doom, let's stop the treatment. Fortunately, Franklin Richards, the son of Reed and Susan Richards, would bring both teams to their senses and Kitty would be healed. Next, there'll be this whole thing where Kitty joins the UK-based group Excalibur, but then she leaves and rejoins the X-Men and finds out that Emma Frost is on the team and doesn't trust her one little bit. Emma Frost actually wanted Kitty on the team because she knew that the person that trusted her the least would be the first to notice if she reverted back into being evil, and that person had to be Kitty. Next, in the Torn story arc, Kitty would defeat and take down Emma Frost and imprison her, but then nothing really important in terms of character development would happen for Kitty in this story arc, so we're just gonna loosely go over it. So basically, the Hellfire Club attack the Xavier School, and Kitty is put under this psychic delusion to think that she had a baby, and that baby is in a box in the center of the Xavier Institute. So she's going to that box, but in reality inside of that box is an alien entity that will hurt a lot of people if it's released. So nothing really big for Kitty would happen. Basically the day will be saved by Cyclops and the X-Men end up going to Breakworld to take part in that story arc. On Breakworld, there will be a missile pointed at Earth, and Kitty would be put on a team set to stop the missile. And Kitty would try phasing through it, and she notices that it's made out of the same stuff as the planet Breakworld, and that stuff is really hard to phase through. Once Kitty makes it to the center of the missile, she would find out that it is empty on the inside, meaning that it's being controlled from the outside, and then it would be fired straight towards Earth, and Kitty would pass out. Emma Frost would then psychically link up with Kitty and be like, girl, just wake up, everything's gonna be fine, we're gonna get you out of there, even though it was really obvious to the two of them that it was a bit too late for that. During that psychic link-up, the two of them would grow to trust each other and genuinely care for one another. And then Kitty would realize what she has to do. Kitty would use all of her strength and all of her power to phase this missile through the Earth. After this, the missile would continue to shoot out into space and no one in the X-Men know if Kitty is alive or dead. Eventually, Magneto would turn up to Utopia and be like, hey, can I join you guys? Is it cool for me to be here? And the X-Men are like, you can be here, but we're not happy about it. To gain the X-Men's trust, Magneto would go to the top of a mountain and focus all of his powers on the missile that Kitty is trapped in and would bring it back to Earth and would free Kitty from the inside of it. So it turns out that while Kitty was inside of the missile, she created such a strong muscle memory to stay intangible that she's not able to solidify again and she's not able to speak. Also, all of her bodily functions had halted, meaning while in the missile she didn't pee, she didn't poop, and she didn't eat. Kitty's powers would eventually return to normal when some Breakworlders would come to Earth, would kill her, and then revive her, and this totally restarts all of her powers. Next, Kitty would go with Wolverine to Westchester to help open up the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. In the Avengers vs X-Men event, Kitty doesn't take a side, she just stays at the school and looks after all of the students, and she would eventually go on a date with Iceman. This date is adorable because they try having like a normal dinner date and then realize this is really boring. Wait, we're mutants, we can do crazy things. So they go about doing crazy things. As always, I don't get into too many details for very recent happenings, but Kitty was present for X-Men Battle of the Atom. I'm eventually going to make a video about Battle of the Atom because if you want to know what an X-Men event should look like, pick up X-Men Battle of the Atom. It's possibly one of my favorite X-Men events. And that's it for Kitty. I really do like her as a character, but I feel like she's very underdeveloped. I think there's so much more that you can do with a character that's been around as long as her. She has a fantastic concept going with her, and there's so many places that you could take her powers, and they're just kind of ignored. It's a bit like Dazzler, really. She's just kind of ignored. I want to see Kitty evolve. I think there is too much that you can do with her to ignore her, but it needs to be done right. It's super effective! Okay guys, that is it for today. If you think I missed anything important about Kitty Pryde, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history, and also don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.